Okay, so last but not least, we have Clueless from 1995, and this one stars Alicia Silverstone, Paul Rudd, and Brittany Murphy. This might have been the first one that I thought of when I thought to do this topic. Was like, it's got so much shit in it that it's just like, holy shit, like I can't fucking believe. I don't want to steal a moment or anything, but like, there is a moment where the character Elton says in class, "I can't find my Cranberries CD," and this very phrase is so 90s. I can hardly even like wrap my head around it.
Well, so you know, we've talked about all these movies, like, you know, some of them reflect the time, some of them kind of defined the time, or a combination thereof. To me, this one 1000% reflects the 90s. Like, I feel like somebody just filmed a bunch of people for a few days in, you know, Beverly Hills or wherever the hell they're supposed to be, and then turned it into a movie. This just screams the soundtrack, the cultural references, the look, the way people talk, the lines, the one you just gave about the Cranberries CD. Like, it's just screams 90s. Like,
oh god, it really does.
This could almost like go into a time capsule as something that represents what the 90s looked and sounded like.
It's funny because there's like aspects of it, obviously, that are like, no one who's watching it for the most part is going to relate to. Like, girls that were in high school in the 90s couldn't relate to Alicia Silverstone's character Cher and her like massive wealth and like all of these things that she could do. But it was also like she was still doing and saying things that it was right in the, you know, right where it needed to be relatable to people. I mean, like there's a sequence. It's like, I remember this is the thing that like the movie won me over when I was watching it, and there is a scene where Cher like finds out she got a bad grade on something or whatever, and she calls her friend Dion, played by Stacey Dash, and she's on her cell phone, and already you're like looking at it, and it's just like, it's hilarious because like I remember when I watched it the first time, I thought, holy shit, like she's got a cell phone, it's like a flip phone, you know, like that's so cool. And now I like, the gag is that she is on this phone and she goes out into the hall 5 seconds after she starts the conversation with her, and she runs into her in the hall, and then they hang up their phones. Like, it couldn't wait until they ran each other. Bits like that's fucking hilarious. And now like looking back, those old ass flip phones, they'll never not be hysterical because they just look ridiculous.
By the way, I just recently saw that they're like a commercial for, they're bringing back flip phones, but they're smartphones, and I got very excited.
They do have them. Like I've seen them. They've been around for a little while, actually.
Oh, have they?
They're.
I'm out of touch.
Yeah, it's really all right. I've not heard many good things about them, but
like you said, this one is very 90s. It's the 90s alternative. I think they open the movie with, or somewhere early on, they're playing No Doubt, like old school Gwen Stefani, when she's getting dressed and she has that old timey 90s computer with a very 90s graphic, and the graphics and colors. And it's like, at that time, that was like the computer of a rich person, you know?
Right.
Because again, something people I feel like have forgotten was that, like, at that point in the 90s, not everybody had a computer in their house at all.
No, right.
My family certainly didn't, you know? So that was like part of her rich kid. They referenced the Mentos commercial when Brittany Murphy is watching it and singing along with it. That was like a very 90s thing. Cindy Crawford reference. She was the hot shit in the 90s. Their dance that they go to at their school, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones are the band. They're watching Ren and Stimpy. They've got cassettes and VHS tapes. Like, all that stuff is just like, it's a time capsule.
So that's what I was like noticing as I was watching it. I can't make sense of it because it's like, basically this movie, by all accounts, should not hold up. Like, but it's like almost in the way that it calls so much attention to all these now dated things is how it's like endured. You know what I mean? Like, it's not right. It's just like, it's front and center, and they're talking about it, you know?
So I actually wrote in my final thoughts, but I'll jump to it now, is it's so entrenched and leans in so hard into its time and place that it like feels like a period piece. Like, if they made that movie today and wanted to blatantly set it in the 90s, they would do all the same things. Yeah. So as a result, it holds up like a period piece. And instead of feeling dated, it feels like it holds up weirdly, like ironically, right? Like you wouldn't think it would, but it actually feels like a period piece, right?
Right. It becomes like funny in a different way in many aspects.
Right. You had mentioned some of the terms they use, like the as if, whatever, hello, Betty. They call girls a Bet. She's a Betty. Totally bugging. Oh, when they are trying to find the party in the valley, Stacey Dash is reading the map as Donald Faison is driving. That is a scene that, like, it still kind of endures, but in a different way.
Yeah.
But, like, it's made mostly irrelevant because of turn-by-turn directions. But even so, that's, like, something that's always kind of stuck with me is, like, just in general, people's inability to read a map and how frustrating it is trying to get directions if the person giving them to you doesn't know how to read a map. Made extra frustrating by the fact that, like, and I'm probably going to sound like an asshole saying it, but, like, it's literally connect the dots with the dots already connected. My entire life since I was a kid, I don't understand how people don't understand how to read a map. It blows my mind. Like, I'll never, to this day, if you need somebody to tell you which way to turn because you don't have your turn-by-turn directions up or something, and they just pull up Google Maps and they get confused, it's like, it's connect the dots with the dots already connected. Which way does the line go, left or right? We are the blue dot. Do I need the blue dot to go left or right? Like, it's not that hard. Anyway,
and it doesn't help that, like, some people, I think some people can read maps, but they're shit at giving directions, like understanding how much notice. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying that for some people, I think that that's a thing.
Yeah, but that is definitely one scene that kills me every time I watch it. When Donald Faison just goes, he like growls because he's so frustrated. It just like speaks to my soul.
Right.
I love it.
Do you think that there are any Breckin-Meyer roles that Seth Green did not audition for?
I feel like, much like Dave Chappelle has joked about, there was an entire decade where, like, it was either him or Chris Tucker for every role that one of them played. I feel like, Seth Green and Breckin-Meyer were probably that.
Yeah.
Similarly, like, we need a silly stoner white kid. Like, it's well, obviously we're going to get either Breckin-Meyer or Seth Green. Just see which one is available. You know? Yeah.
So that's the other thing I noticed as well, is like I kept catching myself wanting to be frustrated by how dumb everyone was, especially Cher. And I realized, like, I can't really be mad because the movie is fucking called Clueless and she is supposed to behave as such, but it's still like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, I cannot fucking believe how ridiculous this is. Like, she's just...
Well, see, she's actually, though, it's weird because she's not as stupid, right? She's kind of naive and stuff, but she's also kind of smart in a lot of weird ways, right? Like, she's clever. That was actually one of the things I wrote down, was that I remember when this came out in 95, and I remember the trailer specifically, and they made it look like it was a very slapstick movie about just a bunch of totally dumb idiot people. And like, all the clips in the trailer were like her falling off the bed when she goes to flip her hair, her almost running the guy on the bike off the road when she's doing driving lessons, her or Brittany Murphy, I think, getting hit in the head with the shoe. That was all the bits that they played in the trailer. What made it look like it was a Lesser Wayans Brothers movie or something.
Right. It's not, but it's not an indication of what the movie is.
In reality, the movie is not remotely that. Like, those are the only 3 bits like that where they do that. The rest of it is like dialogue based, her trying to plot and scheme to, get her grades up and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it's totally different than what they make it look like in the trailer. And I think it's actually better because of that, because spoiler alert, I really like this movie. I gave it a very high grade. But even when she's doing her classroom debates, and it's so silly, but I wrote down that, the debate on immigration seems oddly still relevant. But when she says, it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty. Like, it's brilliant.
I read somewhere in the trivia section that Alicia Silverstone did not know how to pronounce Haitians, and she kept saying Haitians, and so they would not correct her, and they let her say it.
I did notice that, Haitians.
More on the movie side of things. This might be a 90s thing. Let's say you're in high school, you have a crush on this girl, but you're not dating her. Do you put a picture of her in your locker, like on the door of your locker, like inside?
As a guy? No.
As a guy, right?
As a girl in middle school, I feel like they did do those kind of things, or write on their binders, "I hurt so and so," and that kind of stuff. But as a guy, no, you would definitely get made fun of for that.
But the assertion in this movie is not only would this Elton guy do that, but he hangs up a picture of Brittany Murphy because Cher took the picture and he's got a crush on Cher. And I'm like, that is kind of weird. Get out of here. Like, that's ridiculous. And it's like explained like, well, obviously that was what I was doing because that's what makes sense.
I had the picture you took. Wow, that's creepy. That's creepy.
Also the line that Cher is saving herself for Luke Perry, very 90s.
Yes. That is very 90s. Very 90s. I also, the guy that plays Elton is played by Jeremy Sisto. He played Billy Chenoweth in 6 Feet Under. I don't know if you ever saw that, where he plays similarly kind of a douchebag jerk type guy.
Right.
But in general, I think Jeremy Sisto is like the quintessential great 90s douchebag. He plays that role, like he owns that role.
Right.
Because you see him pop up and stuff now and then in the 90s, and it's like he's always playing that guy.
Yeah, and it like with him, it's like he looks the part of like the guy who would be the popular guy, and then but he'd also be
popular guy, but kind of a sleazebag, kind of sleazy, not overly so. He's not evil, but he's like kind of date rapey,
Right. The moment where Cher is like doing this commentary on male fashion in the 90s, and it's like hitting a checklist of every single thing that did not, like, for the most part, age out of the 90s. Like, it did not make it out of this decade. Because it's like,
you're talking about Donald Faison.
Well, it's like it's Donald Faison, but it's also like they show like a shot of these, like, because she's talking about like white guy fashion, and it's like 3 or 4 guys that aren't characters in the movie. They're just walking, and it's like they've got the Jinko jeans on. Is that in this movie? Fuck, I lost track. But something in this movie or one of the other movies we've done, I noticed a very strong thing with like people wearing a t-shirt with like an overshirt.
Yes.
That was like also a t-shirt or like a button-up shirt, and it's like it's so it's so prevalent in these movies. It's ridiculous.
Well, again, so I'll jump into the things that I relate to from this movie, like my personal experience of the 90s. I don't think I ever didn't wear 2 t-shirts at a time my entire 90s life. I always had a t-shirt on under my t-shirt. Always.
Right.
I had a t-shirt on, whether I was wearing a flannel shirt, I had a t-shirt on under it. If I was wearing a t-shirt, I was wearing a t-shirt under it. Always, always, always. So yeah, I think that is very 90s. And kind of jumping off that, there's one scene where Alicia Silverstone is wearing like a tank top over a t-shirt. It's like a spaghetti strap tank top that she's wearing over a t-shirt.
Right.
And that to me feels very, very 90s, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think the trends and the fashions are very much so. What I was going to say about my experience. So this came out, as we said, in 1995. I was 13 years old. And I feel like we may have even talked about this on this podcast before. But like all the things as an adult cisgendered male, right? That I find attractive and that like turn me on if I see it in, on an attractive woman are born out of what was popular, what girls, not just my age, but probably a little older than me also were wearing when I was 13 years old. Or like between 13 and 17. Whatever the good looking girls that were either in my grade or a little older than me that, were super hot, right? Whatever they were wearing when I went through puberty, basically, to this day. And I wrote some of them down. I was like, the chokers, the tank top over the t-shirt, a girl in a flannel shirt, gets me going.
Oh,
Like,
man.
this was less my town or school, but certainly in this movie, the skirts that she wears and stuff, like
Mhm.
all those things now, if I were to see a good looking woman walking down the street wearing a choker and a
Oh, yeah.
flannel shirt or something, like I would be like, oh man, she's super hot. Like there's something that like it just triggers my lizard brain, like back
Right.
to when I was 13 years old, that like I'll never grow out of, right? And
Was
seriously, I think if I wouldn't have been a teenager in the mid to late 90s, I don't think
mhm.
I'd even noticed chokers. But that's
Probably
what
not.
all the girls were wearing at the time, and I will
Right.
not. It's seared into my lizard brain.
So wait, was Alicia Silverstone, was she like a crush of yours during
I,
this
I,
time, or?
so yeah, so that was kind of what I was writing. Was like I was 13 when I came out, and Alicia Silverstone was like kind of the it girl. We talked about Christina
Brittany
Applegate
Murphy?
being
Oh, yeah, yeah.
being the it girl when we were talking about 1991's "Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead." I feel like by 95, when this came out, Alicia Silverstone was the it girl. She was in those
Right.
Aerosmith commercials, in multiple of them. She was in both the commercial for "Crying" and "Amazing."
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes, I did know
She's
that.
in both of
Yes.
those, and that's really where she got famous. Because that was before this. She was
Right.
she was the girl from the Aerosmith videos, and so she was hot stuff. And then she did this, which was a very different role than what she plays in the Aerosmith videos. But all to say, I find her incredibly attractive in the movie
Mhm.
and in general, and I think it's because she was kind of that it girl in the Aerosmith videos. She's wearing flannel shirts, like I said,
Mhm.
and all that stuff. In this movie, she's wearing chokers and tank tops over t-shirts and whatever. Like basically whatever Alicia Silverstone was wearing from 1994 to 1996 is what is forever seared into my brain as what an
Man.
attractive girl dresses like. And I don't think there's any way that I can like ever shake that.
I had a crush on her when I was around this
Mm-hmm.
movie came out, and then of course, like I couldn't have been more excited that she was going to play Batgirl in the upcoming masterpiece Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
And
Did it break your heart? You didn't
well,
love
no,
that
you have to
movie despite.
understand. No, you have to understand. Like
Uh,
when I was 10 when Batman and Robin came out, and like I
right.
don't think
True.
it registered that it was like I didn't need to watch it more or ever again, but it was like I didn't recognize that it was like a bad movie. Like
Right.
I didn't
Right.
put those pieces together because it was just excitement and all that stuff, and I
Right.
love Batman, so what can you do?
Well, yeah, so that really sums up, I guess, my experience with it. I talked about the trailer earlier, on how the movie really isn't what's in the trailer, which is a good thing because I think it's much better than what they alluded to in the trailer. I've always loved this movie. One thing we haven't talked about, though, is Paul Rudd.
I was just gonna say that.
And Paul Rudd, to me, I can honestly, with a straight face, say that I've been saying for 28 years that Paul Rudd is a genius. He is a treasure. I have been a fan of his since this movie. He was probably my favorite part of the movie. And I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like to a certain degree, I spent my entire life, for me, the character I was emulating was probably Paul Rudd in this. Like,
Yeah.
even when I was probably in high school and college, the line where she says he has a knack for finding the only adult in the room and striking up a conversation with him? I feel like
Mhm.
that's been me my entire life. I got along with people's parents better than I did my own peers. Like,
Yeah. He's like the perfect anti-Cher in this movie. Like
yeah,
everything stupid that she's saying, if he's around, he's making fun of her for it. And she's just kind of like shrugging him off, like, oh, he's
yeah,
so annoying, you know? Like on the same note of like, because I love Paul Rudd. I
yeah.
mean, everybody should love Paul Rudd. But
Right. I
um
love Paul Rudd. Even Michelle mentioned as we were watching, she was like, Paul Rudd is so great. It's like, of course he
he
is. He's
really
the
is. And
best.
it's, I mean, the only thing I found weird in watching, every time I've seen this movie, even when it came out, like it was like, I've always found it a tad odd, the whole ex stepbrother
Yes.
dating. Yeah.
There is something goofy in that, right?
There's something weird there. But I
Yeah.
mean, I guess if this, her dad's like a serial marrier, like he might
Mhm.
just have so many that it's like you're depleting the dating pool for your daughter if you've married
Right, right.
everyone.
Yeah, and then of course he gets the ultimate payoff at the end when he gets to do that like absurdly aggressive kiss with her at the end,
Oh yeah, yeah.
where it's like
Right.
all tongue. You're like, oh
Right.
my god, like,
Oh my
like,
god.
are you
It's
are we
so
sure this is
ridiculous.
rated correctly?
Oh my
uh,
god.
Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much everything I have to say about that movie.
Okay.
I still like it. I think it holds up. Like I said, like a period piece. I give it an A.
Okay.
I love this movie.
I definitely still enjoy the humor. Like I said, it has somehow aged like a fine wine when every indication would be that it should not have aged like a fine wine.
Shockingly.
Right.
It should have turned to vinegar and somehow it didn't.
Right. And so, I mean, I still love it for that. There's a lot of, I mean, like, I love a lot of the humor, a lot of, Cher doesn't, with her being as clueless as she is, she doesn't know what things are, but she, like, knows that she should think that they're interesting or, like, worth talking about, but she'll, like, pronounces Spartacus as Sporadicus and things like that. And
that Sporadicus guy.
she has no idea who. Yeah. But yeah, I love it. I give it an A as well. I really like it. It's
also, we didn't really mention Brittany Murphy, but she shouldn't be overlooked in this either. No. She was excellent, and she was also. I've always kind of liked Brittany Murphy too. She did the voice of Bobby Hill in King of the Hill.
Oh shit!
And she's
really
she's surprisingly like more brilliant than you realize. I think if you really start to look at all the stuff she did, she was fantastic.
Yeah,
Rip Brittany Murphy. So that's the 6 that we chose. That's not to say that's the best 6 or the most quintessential 6, but it's certainly the 6 that we chose that would be fun to talk about. And a couple of those were specifically, I think, we settled on because we thought they'd be fun to talk about. I did write down a few others as like also mentions that
I did too.
We probably could have put in there for very different reasons even. One of them that I know that we had waffled on a little bit, or at least mentioned, was American Pie, which again for me was one that like I always felt was kind of my generation's version of like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I don't know, it seemed weirdly reflective of like probably me and my friends in high school. It came out in '99, so I would have been in high school. It made use of like webcams and stuff when webcams were a very new and weird thing. Yeah. I can't say we specifically related to the naked girl changing in your room, whatever that they put on the webcam and all that, but there's definitely like the dynamic between the characters and stuff felt very like of its time. I wrote down the great Adam Sandler movies of the 90s that we didn't include. Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore, like those, probably Happy Gilmore more so than Billy Madison, I think, but if you look back on them, they definitely have a 90s look to him. He dresses like a slacker from the 90s, right?
Yeah. And strangely enough, like Happy Gilmore, even though it was made after, it seems more low budget than Billy Madison. I don't know how.
Yeah, maybe it's just the mansion. I don't know.
Yeah.
Billy Madison. A couple of movies that were huge and became cult classics, though I don't know that they really reflect the time necessarily. But The Big Lebowski and Office Space were both in the 90s, and I feel like those are two movies that probably are like major touch points in like cinematic history as far as like, low budget cult classic type movies. I don't know that they really worked for what we were trying to capture here with this. Right. I also wrote down Don't Be a Menace. You remember that one with the lesser Wayans? It's like a lesser Wayans version of Friday to an extent, kind of. I feel like they springboarded off of the Friday success and tried to, it's a goofball slapstick comedy that takes place in the hood.
Well, it is
more cartoonish,
a spoof.
I think.
Like it's a spoof in the way that like the Naked Gun movies are spoofs. Like it's silly and it's like spoofing Boys in the Hood and South Central and
it was doing the
Menace to
Society. The Wayans, yes, hence Don't Be a Menace, right? It's spoofing them in that Wayans way that they went on to do, all the scary movies and all that. But it was probably it might have been the first one that they did, right? Those like Marlon and Sean Wayans, like
because I mean, like Damon would have already been around for a while,
and Keenan Ivory too, because they were both from In Living Color fame.
Yeah,
but that one I definitely remember as being like a very 90s spoof on 90s culture, movies like that inner city urban thing.
I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, this is the most fucking ridiculous movie I've ever like. It's so over the top.
That's when I feel like me and all my friends thought were hilarious at the time, but I feel like by the time I got to high school, it seemed really stupid.
Right.
And like within a few years, it didn't hold up. I don't know that I'd even want to be interested in going back and watching it now. And then the only other two that I wrote down off the top of my head were the other two from 1994, the other two Jim Carrey movies, The Mask and Dumb and Dumber. But I feel like Ace Ventura is the quintessential one, though. Really, that was the first of the three. And that's probably the reason the other two made $100 million also, Right. Though if I were to step out of the whole thing and look back and say which one might actually be the funniest of all of them. I think Dumb and Dumber would be a strong candidate for the one that like has probably stood the test of time better than any of the others. But again, I feel like that isn't quite as reflective from if we're trying to wrap this whole discussion in a 90s context.
Some of the ones that I have that you didn't mention were like Tommy Boy was like one I immediately think of as far as comedies.
Yep. Oh 90s. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, definitely.
Swingers with Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn. I thought that was, but I thought that was more of a drama. Like it's funny. Yeah. It's got a lot of comedy.
Right.
But it's
different. That one also though. That one, I think that could almost go in a similar boat as like The Big Lebowski and Office Space as movies that were probably punched way above their weight class in terms of like influence and inspiring a generation of filmmakers and stuff who saw that. I guess if you zoom out and look at our definition of our idea of the quintessential 90s, if we're relating our experience with it and how we remember the 90s, Swingers would not have been my experience.
No, I agree.
That would have been like people 10 years older than me. Maybe it would have been how they remembered the 90s, but it would have been a good,
memorable like indie 90s comedies, but not ones that were like
right. This one wouldn't. It doesn't speak to me on a level of like, oh, that's how I remember the 90s, or that's what me and my friends thought was cool. Like,
right.
I don't even think I was aware of Swingers until I was in college, 2000s, right?
Right.
But that is good pick though. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's all I had for those for the not mentioned.
Well, that's all I got. I hope everyone enjoyed this stroll down memory lane as much as I did.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it was highly enjoyable. I had a good time. So
and now I own both Ace Ventura and Friday, which I didn't own before you texted me with this idea. I did already have Ace Ventura 2, but I didn't have the first one.
I'm glad I could make a difference in your life, Dan.
Yes. All right, now I gotta go grill some ribs. I'm late.
All right, sounds good. Good. Have fun. We'll see
you
later.
Talk to you later.
See you. Brandon at Random Reviews artwork, theme music, and podcast are written, performed, recorded, engineered, directed, and produced by Brandon Griffiths in association with Brandon at Random Reviews Entertainment.